Hello and welcome back to this keynote panel, Collaborating to Bridge the Digital Divide. We're delighted that you've joined us. And before I introduce the panel, I want to give a quick thank you to the diamond sponsors of ITW 2021, AT&T, Bankai Group, Deutsche Telekom Global Carrier, and Saudi Telecom Company, and to all our other sponsors and partners for making this event possible. Furthermore, if you'd like to ask any questions to the speakers throughout the session, you can do so using the live chat function on the Swapcard app or the desktop version. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our session moderator, Mark Halfinger, who will introduce the panelists.
Thanks very much, Sophia, and welcome to this new and improved version of ITW. My name is Mark Helpfinger. I'm from PCCW Global. We operate a global network and our Console Connect software-defined fabric. I'm joined this morning or this evening, depending upon where you're with us, by an outstanding group, and I'll let each of them introduce themselves. And we'll start with one of the members of the Diamond Sponsor Group that Sophia just highlighted, Mohammed Al-Abadi from Saudi Telecom from STC. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and what you do, please.
Thank you very much, Mark. Real pleasure to be here with you, virtually at least in ITW and with the rest of this great panel. My name is Mohammed Al-Abadi. I'm the Chief Wholesale Officer for STC, running all of the wholesale business, including our international services. And again, really happy to be with this great group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Frederick Shepins from MTN Global Connect.
Yes, thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody in Washington and all over the world. It's a pity I can't be there today, but through this virtual means, I think it's a great opportunity to share our experience. My name is Fred Shepins, CEO of MTN Global Connect. We manage all the infrastructure for the MTN Group. Also are on a mission to fiberize and make sure that we let's put it like that, narrow the digital divide on the African continent.
And Bill Barney from Turbidite, please introduce yourself as if you require introduction.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Bill Barney. I'm probably not the youngest guy here, but the youngest company here. We just launched in March of this year. We're the up-and-coming edge data center company in the emerging markets, and hopefully you'll hear a lot about us over the next few months. So glad to be here with everybody around the world.
Yeah, and saving us with regard to respect at ITW physically, Chris Downey from Flexential on stage in the Gaylord. Chris, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Mark, and great to be here and great to see everyone and be able to partially sponsor the ITW event. I guess I will say, Mark, that I think they say one is the loneliest number, so I feel pretty lonely up here. But my name's Chris Downey. I'm the CEO of Flexential. Flexential owns and operates a national domestic U.S. data center platform that provides a host of hybrid solutions to enterprise and technology companies across the country that provide services to customers across the globe. Our hybrid solutions are co-location, connectivity, cloud, data protection and storage, and professional services, all that's really all that come together to enable solutions that are critical, in particular in this pandemic period for companies across the globe.
Thanks very much, Chris, and it's great to see you. And thank you very much for representing the panel out there. And towards the end, as a show of solidarity, we'll all try and put on our masks to make sure that you're feeling as if we're with you there on stage. So let's start out. Our panel title is Collaborating to Bridge the Digital Divide. And I guess in order to do that, it might make sense first to define what is the digital divide. How would you characterize it? How did it evolve? And frankly, does it even exist in today's world? And maybe, Bill, since you celebrated your birthday or passing through the birthday today, perhaps you might start and tell us, what is the digital divide in your mind, and does it exist?
Well, I think the digital divide is something that's been at a lot of these conferences over the years, talking about the essentially people that don't have access to the internet and people that do have access to the internet, and sort of this idea that the wealthy have got it and sort of the rural areas and some of the poorer countries don't have access. I would argue, after watching what's happened through COVID and in places like Asia, where I actually live in Hong Kong, but throughout Southeast Asia, I would say the digital divide has been closed fairly aggressively in the last 24 months. If you look at broadband penetration in Southeast Asia, Latin America, even in the Middle East, you've seen jumps in terms of users coming onto the net. And I would say part of it's new technology, 5G and coming into play, but also just the expansion of networks around the world. And I think, and it's been because the internet was something for corporates for a long time, and now it's people that have to go to school have to be on the internet. And so it's completely changed. It's become a utility for all humans. And I think I would say that the digital divide is largely gone. But I'll leave that to the rest of the group to talk.
Well, provocative statement, certainly, and particularly when you bring about Southeast Asia as representative. Let me flip from Hong Kong to the other side of the globe. Chris Downey on the stage, representing Flexential. Would you agree with Bill? In the United States, does the digital divide exist, or what's your perspective on it? And how is it meaningful, if at all, to the ICT community?
Sure. Well, I think in the U.S. the digital divide still very much exists, and you see very tangible evidence of that. Although I do think the answer to the digital divide question is really geography dependent. Although I'd say that there are obviously poorer populations in every part of the globe. As I was preparing for this panel, I did a little bit of research, and there's some statistics that 36% of black households in the U.S. don't have a computer or access to broadband access. And 30% of black students don't have access to quality broadband access as well. And so that's just a staggering number. I do think, though, to Bill's comment, the pandemic has certainly created a heightened sense of importance for the digital divide, and you see lots of government funding that's getting teed up to support that, because it's we just can't really have that type of divide when people need that access for education and healthcare, just to name a few critical areas.
Thanks very much for that perspective. Very interesting, Chris, to come from the United States and to offer up that in the United States itself there's a digital divide. Maybe that leads into you, Frederick. Do you want to side with the perspective perhaps that Bill has provided, or with the perspective that Chris has provided? MTN, I know, is very focused throughout the Middle East and Africa, countries with a diverse range of GDP and productivity statistics. What's your view?
I think, on both sides, there's great value in what Bill and Chris is saying. When you look at it from a more emerging and developed countries side, you do have the statistics like Chris was saying. Usually the internet penetration is above the 90% in the US and in Europe, and above 80 or even more in Asia. When you start looking into the Middle East and mainly in Africa, you've got a totally different picture. So we run one of the largest mobile operators in the world, MTN, about 270 million subscribers. And we do see quite some disparity in market by market also. Especially when you look into the African continent, especially sub-Saharan, you got around 41% of actually internet penetration, which gives you a little bit of an idea of what digital can do. when we look into our customer base and when we look into the statistics, what the GSMA is given, because I also did a bit of homework here, and you see around 747 million subscribers in Sub-Sahara has a mobile phone. Now, only 1/3 has a real internet connection towards that phone also. Now, you see that there's still quite a bit of growth in order to make that work from a digital enablement towards one of the largest continents in the world. Don't forget also that you can fit most of the US, Asia, and Europe into that continent in terms of supervision. So, and on the demographic aspect, you also see that that is growing super really fast on the African continent. So, again, I think we've got a long way in order to make that happen. And it's still very divided, for me at least.
Understood. Well, Mohammed, maybe you can give us perspective from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on this whole discussion. Within the kingdom, does the digital divide exist? And perhaps you might offer some thoughts about government policies and the approach to bridging the digital divide, if it exists in your environment, and perhaps how is it culturally meaningful in the ICT environment as government tries to evolve policy?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So let me start with Saudi Arabia. I believe that we're seeing a shrinking perspective when it comes to the digital divide. The country has been really focused as part of the Vision 2030 in terms of the enablement of internet connectivity. And we're happy as STC to be really the prime driver of that enablement. If you look at some of the statistics, for example, around 98% of people have quality access to 4G today. There's been a lot of initiatives also to expand on the fixed penetration and the fixed broadband penetration. And even if you look at 5G, I believe we're the leading nation now in the MENA region when it comes to 5G speeds. So there's been a lot of push on that. It's a young population, digital savvy, tech savvy, and they're looking for that as well. So it does enable a lot of the innovation in the country that helps us achieve the vision. Now, what I wanted to say is that I tend to agree with Chris and Bill in the sense of while the divide itself might be declining, I think the impact of the divide is actually getting bigger because that's the gap that's happening between those who have and those who have not. I think with the situation with COVID and the lockdown, it's as Chris was saying, it heightened the sense of urgency because you saw a lot of things that might have been good to have or differentiators, and they've become necessities to have right now. And that gap in terms of the impact, I think, is getting bigger because of the speed of transformation across all industries. So while digital might have been important for a few industries, now it's part of everything we do in our life. So I think there's still more importance or urgency on governments and policymakers to find the right ways to make sure to continue to find the right way to bring down that divide and have the operators find a way to continue to invest and monetize their infrastructure to improve those statistics.
Got you. So if I was trying to take a little bit of the diversity of opinion here, I would say that the argument is that we're all living through a period of transformation. Whether you characterize it with a divide or not, that I guess is the nuance of your different views. And let's perhaps borrow from the title that they handed us, the team from ITW and Capacity, collaboration. Can collaboration take us to the next step, whether or not you believe there's a divide or if the divide is shrinking, but rather, let's borrow for a moment the word transformation. Do we believe that collaboration of different elements in the ICT environment can lead to accelerating the transformation process? Chris, would you like to offer a perspective
Sure.
from where you sit?
Sure. I think almost in every respect, collaboration is the only thing that enables this transformation. There's not one company in the world that can piece together the components that are going to deliver the information or the application to everywhere it needs to be. And I think that during this pandemic, it's really just accelerated the need for information to be delivered to places perhaps you never thought it was going to have to be delivered before. And so I think there's there's been obviously working relationships between companies, but I think there's so much social importance of putting these fabrics together to deliver upon the solutions to those social problems. So I think collaboration is really the only way that it's going to happen, and that's across not just companies but governments and companies and not for profits and for profits. So certainly a lot of work to do.
Got it. Bill, are you in on that one or a different view? Do you believe collaboration is there and a necessary component for transformation, divide or not? And if you do say yes, well, what do you think are some of the components of the collaboration that we need to consider or that need to be understood by end users?
Well, I think sitting in Hong Kong, it's sort of an interesting question because I would say that I think corporations and industries like ours have been great at collaborating over the years, and I think we are going to be critical to this next stage in the development. But I think there's in the background, there's also governments that are not necessarily collaborating now and actually are heading in sort of different directions that may cause Chinese and American standards or different things that may cause challenges to making collaboration easy for us. So in many ways, we all were adapting similar 4G technologies, for example, in the mobile space, and we're using similar protocols for delivering video and those types of services. I think we're starting to see that there may be this sort of nationalistic approach that may cause some challenges for all of us operators around the world in terms of how we can build a seamless service across the globe, because I think there's going to be competing different technology groups. And so I think there is a challenge coming or a headwind coming to collaboration, which is not being brought by the industry, but is being brought by, I think, trade issues and sort of politics and diplomacy and a lot of the other things that are going on in the world. So I think I'm excited to think that we can all collaborate and make these things happen, but I think there will be some challenges in the year ahead.
That's a very interesting comment. You're saying on the one hand, we're headed towards the requirement that you're effectively agreeing with Chris that we require increased collaboration in order to facilitate the complexity that's evolving for end users in the most simple fashion. And yet at the same time, those that are charged arguably with our welfare, for their very reasons, whatever they may be, policy, security, whatever, are perhaps considering different vectors. And we as service providers will need to factor all of that. Fascinating perspective on collaboration. Frederick, any thoughts that you'd like to add to that from your environment, which sees both the world of government and the world of service provider?
Yeah, I think our philosophy is simple. I mean, I'll give you one of these African proverbs, Mark, if you don't mind. And it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far and grow together, then. So we approach Africa's progression and growth with an open mind on partnerships. The net goal is, of course, at the end, an increased connectivity, which, of course, will be underpinned by the way how we explore our own fiber, where we do have around 85,000 proprietary fiber across the continent, which we now going to open up through MTN Global Connect as an open access facility, where we will be able to offer that to everybody who's willing to take it, even our competitors locally. I think there's a big need in order to cooperate together also between ourselves, our other players, the African governments, the corporate sector, and also use that shared information and best practices really to adopt and to fuel also what we learned through the pandemic, that there's a big need to connect the unconnected also on the continent. So this is also why we decided also to spend another $500 million in the coming years in order to fast track that rollout of connectivity and driving this collaboration between the countries, within the countries on the African continent, and really build strong partnerships and collaborative models across the board.
I got it. So, I mean, we talked about the different elements or perhaps the trends, and Bill was referring to the political side as trade winds, but maybe let me try and unpack that a little bit and just ask, what are the components? One might argue we have different forms of infrastructure today, networks, data centers, clouds, wireless networks, fixed networks, and so on. We have all sorts of elements of applications that are out there. What are the components that are engaged in facilitating this collaboration? Bill, you argue that governments might be providing trade winds to foster a little bit of a lack of cooperation in some instances, but one might argue that governments also might create the environment for further collaboration, if nothing else, at least in a domestic agenda. Mohammed, any thought on what these components might be and what need to be the goals that collaboration around this target, assuming we want to do away with the digital divide over time and focus on the collaborative elements that we were talking about here for transformation? How do you see that?
Yeah, I believe there's a lot of different stakeholders that are driving this in terms of how do you reach those common goals. And the government is best placed in terms of policy making to ensure at least the floor when it comes to some of the trade-offs or returns for the different stakeholders are achieved. As mentioned by Frederick, there's a lot of things that operators are doing today. We have in STC a sustainability strategy that we're very proud of. And in order to achieve that, there's a lot of things we are doing to give back to the community. So we've also worked with the policymaker in a win-win situation with all licensed operators in terms of the open access program. And that's helping increase on the broadband penetration when it comes to the fixed network. Actually, yesterday, the National CITC, the Commission for ITC Policy, announced the National Roaming Program, which allows the licensed operators to give services to consumers in underserviced areas, regardless of the network. So there's a lot of programs like this, but I believe that the government stakeholders are best positioned to see how to make this even more sustainable down the line. So a lot of investment is being put into those elements you just unpacked when it comes to data center infrastructure or 5G networks, et cetera. How do you make sure that from one end you allow the technology involvement and the investment to continue? So it's not just about capex investment, but it's also about research and development and innovation. How do you allow that to continue with the private sector, but also ensure that you can tackle the issues of the digital divide? So you make it affordable to users, you make the ease of access to people, the education, the awareness. It really is not an easy agenda to fulfill holistically, but policymakers are in the best position to make sure that they listen to both parties and put together those policies that enables a win-win situation.
Okay, so you're saying basically a strong dialogue between the service provider community, the ICT ecosystem, and government, at least downstream in a domestic jurisdiction, can facilitate more collaboration. And Bill is highlighting a concern where perhaps different international policy agendas might yield a little bit of a trade tension and ultimately confound the efforts at collaboration at some level. But let's perhaps break it down even further, and perhaps some of our listeners or watchers, or those in the room or those on video, might be interested in just getting some substantive examples. Perhaps one of you would like to raise their hand and offer up either an example to how we can facilitate more collaboration or an example to obstacles. And I'll throw it open to whoever wants to start. Frederick, would you like to give it a first shot, or Chris? I see, Chris, you're going for the mask, so maybe that means you wanted to go for it. Yeah, go on, Chris. Go on.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess first of all, I agree with everything that Mohammed said. It's it's a very complex ecosystem that needs to be kind of managing and managing the relationships and ensuring that there's accountability. But I think just perhaps from the government perspective, I think clearly there has to be policy to lay out, what is the objective that we're trying to achieve, and with that policy become funding. There'll be funding to catalyze, the innovation that's required to at least begin to get towards to work towards those objectives. And so I think what's going on with the broadband infrastructure legislation now in the U.S. that's giving billions of dollars to help catalyze solutions to the digital divide, I think is one example. The other example, I guess, I'd point to is on the cybersecurity side of things. I think it was the the leaders of Apple and Microsoft and Google came together last week with President Biden to discuss cybersecurity, because ransomware is up significantly during this during this pandemic period, which is more virtual than ever before. So I think those are examples where you can see tangible action and people coming together to at least begin the conversation.
Understood. Hey, Frederick, thoughts on either obstacles or examples of collaboration that might go beyond the examples that Chris was giving us, which are very, very important, very germane?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of obstacles, but none can be not overcome. It's a sense of discussing with the relevant parties to make sure that we have progression for the better good within the countries, across the countries, wherever they are. What we did see also is that when you talk to governments, when you talk to investors, when you talk to regulators and partners in the telecom industry, there's always a genuine goodwill of making progress and solving certain problems. And we had the same one also in Africa. We might be running out of capacity on the subsea in the coming decade. This is where we got all together, building a new cable across Africa to Africa. SCC participated, some of the OTTs and other parties there, and we're booting that up in 2023, 2024, where we're going to have the longest, let's say, subsea cable across the largest continent in the world. Now, again, we do see a lot of collaboration ongoing also in markets where we really team up with our friendly competitors, which are also our biggest customers. That's the beauty of being in this fantastic wholesale environment, where you need to really leapfrog in building new state-of-the-art data centers infrastructure, and that's through fiber or 4G, 5G rollout. So, and this is where we really are teaming up on various levels. What is quite interesting is also that we see a lot of the OTTs being really committal and really rolling up their sleeves, like Chris was saying, in order to tackle some pertinent issues, but also bits and bolts in certain countries, although they might not have all the licenses, but they're working together in a collaborative way with the operators, with the wholesalers, with the mobile operators, the fixed operators across the board, which is also super positive, I think. And I think we need to encourage that in order to drive this mission.
Brilliant. That's very. I get where you're headed, Frederick. But let me take it to you, Bill. You're the man here with the entrepreneurial spirit. If you were to take everything that Mohammed was saying and Chris was saying and Frederick, they're giving the environment, so to speak, and they're describing all that's there. But at the end of the day, in order for collaboration to succeed, there's going to have to be some sort of meaningful business model where value is exchanged and everyone is enjoying the benefit of so-called collaboration. Is there a business model in your mind that facilitates collaboration? What does it look like? Is it a business model with governments? We mentioned them. Is a business model with clouds, where clouds have not always traditionally wanted to interoperate? How does an end user get the benefit? What would your entrepreneurial mind say?
Well, listen, I think our industry has I would say the last 24 months has been an example of how we've shown the world how we could work very close together and actually deliver amazing products to people around the world. And I think it's been a great show for anyone that was an operator. And I was before being an entrepreneur, I was a CEO of a telecom company. And so I know that the effort that everyone went through over the last 2 years has been enormous. I would say that the reason why and I don't mean to be the naysayer here, but I think the challenge that we face are that trade issues that were introduced into other sectors that we didn't see as a telecom industry. So like in manufacturing, which was it disrupted supply chains between the United States and China, for example, and also in other parts of the world. We're now starting to see that in our sectors, right? So submarine cables can't go to certain places, or there's landing rights are not being allowed. And then today, over the last week, there's been some announcements around cloud and whether certain cloud providers are allowed to provide cloud to other customers. And there's actually starting to become trade issues around who gets to use cloud. And to be honest with you, what's actually driven our growth and our success has been these applications that have been running through the cloud, right? And the fact that anyone can access anybody's cloud anywhere on the planet, and whether it was Alibaba, whether it was Google Cloud or Amazon, it didn't matter. And today, or the last few months, that started to change. And so while I think we've all enjoyed a lot of acceleration through this, I think there's some challenges coming ahead. And unless some of these things work themselves out, I think we'll start to feel it coming into our industry. That's just my, looking at it from an outsider. And it's more looking from a data and where these applications are coming from, and seeing what headwinds I think are coming on the horizon.
I hear you. Those headwinds are strong, and so we're talking about the government issues, and you're effectively saying also that it dovetails to components of technology and how technology is packaged to the end users and under what conditions. Chris, I know that Flexential not only operates data centers, but is also engaged in advanced technology around your cloud fabric and so on. Do you echo what Bill is saying with regard to technology as a component of how collaboration is delivered? And do you see any concerns with that from a domestic agenda in the United States, or for that matter, globally?
Yeah, I don't disagree. There's clearly a lot of challenges, I'd say, that have been kind of newly presented as it relates to, as an example, supply chain and then supply chain obviously, for us starts with the data center itself, but then ultimately leads to the compute that we use to enable our cloud fabric. And so, we definitely have to be more agile, and I'll go back to the word collaborative, as it relates to, all the infrastructure we need to build a data center. We've got lots of suppliers that we have to ask to be agile so that we can continue to deliver capacity. We just completed our largest data center yet in Hillsborough, and that hosts a number of overseas fiber cables that are critical. I mean, that for them it's critical that we continue to build capacity to enable really the applications that are dependent on those cables. And then as it relates to the network, we've got 230 some odd network providers that enable the federation of information for our customers and our facilities, and each one of those partners in the business. For example, we just announced Telia in Hillsborough as well. Has similar challenges, and so we've got to put those challenges on the table and continue, really, I'd say, more active collaboration than we ever have before.
Got it. So Mohammed and Frederick, the three of us we'll tell the audience a secret. The three of us all serve on the ITW's Global Leaders Forum, right? And one of the mainstays of that mission statement is about interoperability. So let me just introduce that word for a moment and borrow from what Bill is saying and what Chris is saying. Bill is expressing the fact that there may be some challenges even to a collaborative business model. And Chris is explaining how technology can help facilitate more agile relationships among different components of the ecosystem. Is there a concept of interoperability that goes beyond what we've traditionally done in our industry, which was network to network? Do you see a potential, at least, for interoperability with diverse components of the ICT ecosystem? It's an open question. And maybe, Frederick, I know that you and I have had conversations on this over the years, so maybe I'll start with you and give Mohammed a chance to dwell on the question. Go ahead, Frederick.
Yeah, I think, Mark, that's one of my babies, solving the complexity and interoperability across any different platform or any different way of interacting between the digital and the traditional world also. And if you talk about banking technology, or any other digital means. So from that perspective, I think we continue the journey, and I think the GLIF, the Leadership Forum, is certainly a great forum in order to enable that across all markets. What we do, for instance, from an MTN perspective, besides having a kind of the entry door towards Africa, where we try to simplify a lot of the complexity to the entire continent. And if you talk about all services from a from a capacity perspective, bandwidth perspective, or from a roaming, messaging, voice perspective. I mean, that's one of the ways and one of the platforms we are running, and several platforms which we call the Yellow Connect hubs. But also, what is super interesting, what we are now launching and doing quite actively, is that we are opening up through a different means and through an API enablement through a platform which we call Genosis. And Genosis really will be able to give access even to the 270 million subscribers to ask if a bank sees that there is an illegal frauder doing a SIM swap or various other authentications, increasing the security for our customers, but also for all the parties we're interacting. And through a simple interaction and through an API integration, which is kind of open from that perspective, we try to solve a lot of the complexity on the African continent, and mainly to start with on our own massive consumer base. Of course, there's a lot of things around it which you need to be very careful about it in terms of the data knowledge and also the sovereignty aspect. But all of that has been well balanced and well looked into. So this is the next step of interoperability, I think, which will potentially also leapfrog and overcome certain complexities across the world, I think.
Well, that's fantastic. You're basically describing a transparent approach to your operating environment to open up APIs to any complex component of the ICT ecosystem to extract the value that you have so that the users themselves can enjoy the value and also protect perhaps the enterprise base that might want to access those users, if I've understood correctly. An API at the center of that, which is perhaps one of the tools that we might uncover. The tools for collaboration might be API based. Mohammed, any thoughts from your side on whether the complex ecosystem can deliver new forms of interoperability in order to facilitate collaboration?
I want to touch base more on something Bill brought up in terms of how also some of this unpredictable change would make that even more complex. So in essence, I think Fred stated it quite well. We're going to see a lot more integration on the software layer. It's also the crossing overs of how operators are today. We started as traditional telcos, and now each of us have been branching into so many different industries. And there is a sentiment of bringing a full value of services to the consumer. That's what we're doing. So we in STC, we branch into the fintech. We have one of the largest digital pay platforms in the country and maybe in the whole Middle East. And that's really in the sense of how we're adding more and more services around the user. It's about their lifestyle and how can we make sure their ecosystem is prospering. Now, as we go into that complexity of the interoperability, but it's also about all of the unpredictable boundaries when it comes to whether it's regulation, whether it's new policies coming out, potentially government to government, et cetera, that can impact all of the innovation into that stack. So I think that's fundamental, and it's something that when you think about it in the end, as investors, and many of us are licensed, publicly offered companies, the investors are looking to lower risk. And the more that there's stuff that can drive good return, and there's at least some consistency and predictability in terms of all of these changes, these headwinds, that's going to be important. So I think there's going to be a lot more interoperability on the software layer. That's the nature of the kind of things we're offering and how we differentiate ourselves. But it's important also to see how the regulation or the policy making will impact that. Let me give you one small example. But by nature of being operators, we used to always be, let's say, governed by the telco regulation, venturing into services like fintech. So you're venturing into also the banking regulation. But there's a lot of overlap between both, because it's not just offering traditional banking services. It has to do with stuff like data sovereignty. Fred touched upon it. So who owns the policies there about what's allowed and what's not allowed? And that's something that, again, we need to have that kind of dialogue between policymakers, between regulators, et cetera, to find an optimized solution for that.
That's really helpful, Mohammed. You're giving a strong message also to any investor base that might be listening, who traditionally might look at our environment in silos around infrastructure or applications or technology. And your message is actually the boundaries between these environments are starting to dissolve, and telcos might become more technology oriented, and infrastructure companies might be more widely perceived. And I think it's a very helpful message to the potential investor. I have to tell you, it's all fascinating. Perhaps we'll give each of you just a moment to summarize, and I'll tell you why. I've got two screens on my left, one Sophia coming on board saying we're about done, a clock that says 5 minutes left, and the gentleman who's been doing an outstanding job in delivering the illustration, Chris, which is just fantastic what he's done. And he's got no more room left on the page. So maybe each of you, a sentence of summary, and let's focus on the positives. Chris, what do you think is the next positive step towards collaboration despite the challenges, obstacles, and complexity that we've described?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll answer that by just giving, kind of our perspective on where we fit in. We make substantial investments in data centers that really enable the digital journey of, enterprise and technology, and that digital journey basically is constantly increasing the ability to deliver information to places, like I said before, that information's never been available. And so we also make investments into our centers to provide for, really a resilient and redundant and agile environment that can grow not only from a consumption perspective from the customer, but as the technology requirements change, we change with it. And so, we feel we play a critical enablement role in the conversation that you just highlighted.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Mohammed, maybe to you, a 1 minute summary, perhaps, from your perspective of the positives in terms of where we need to go.
Looking at how transformation has been changing our lives, very proud that SCC is continuing really to play a role into the enablement in the Middle East, starting with Saudi, but the whole Middle East as we expand, and looking at the importance of the different ecosystems and the partnerships that we're going to form, all towards changing the lives of people. I think digital is becoming an aspect of everyday life in every single industry, and we're looking really forward to those kind of partnerships that will help change lives.
So no way back is what you're saying, Mohammed, and thank you for that. Frederick, how about you?
Yeah, I think we should remember why we do this. And we do really think at MTN that we believe that everybody deserves the benefits of a modern connected life. And of course, COVID heightened and accelerated that need, which is quite positive across the world for all of us. But we try to put the people before the technology also in place, which is quite noble, I think, from an African perspective. So the InfraCo model, which we ironed out, which is an open access one, the wholesale mobility platforms, like I mentioned, also is really our focus in the coming few years. And I think from a collaborative perspective, let's connect and discuss all these strategies, and let's partner up to make real progress, and ultimately let's all grow together.
Brilliant. Thank you, Frederick. I like that. Bill, last dibs to you, and a chance to offer up a positive perspective.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't want you to think that I lift you with negative ones. No.
God forbid. I just, last dibs to you. That's all. Go on.
Well, I think, to be honest, what's amazing about this industry, which I've been in my whole career, is that in the last 5-6 years, we've seen the collaboration has happened. This is how we actually, we all come together in forums like this. We meet, we work on things, and we solve, problems in our community. And the reality is it's probably one of the most collaborative industries that we can have. And it's a great bunch of people that work together, whether their governments are fighting, they still talk to each other in these forums. And I think it's it's hats off to you guys in terms of pulling on conferences like this, but this is really what keeps the industry going and allows us to adapt during a crisis like COVID. So it's been, I think we saw in the last 2 years how we can actually operate as an industry and look out for each other and make sure that we're successful. So I think no matter what forces come against us, I think this group tends to work together and find solutions. So I'm excited for the next couple decades together.
I'm with you, Bill. I like that. Thanks very much. I want to thank everyone. Actually, the perspectives here that were provided were remarkable, whether it be Chris describing the domestic challenges in the United States, Bill with the political challenges of geopolitics, not afraid to speak out, the Middle East and Africa from Mohammed and from Frederick, and all of the thoughts ultimately came down to the fact that collaboration and interoperability makes sense. And I think that all of you are right. That's frankly what we've been doing. Capacity Media and ITW have been platforms for us always to engage personally and virtually, regardless of the pandemic. And to them, I say thank you very much for allowing us to continue on our mission. Despite whatever political agendas, we've always seemed to try and make sure that people would be able to communicate whatever the rules may be. And I'm confident that if we all simply communicate, we'll be able to move ourselves forward as industry and as a society. And so for that, thank you all very, very much. It was an honor to host this panel, and I look forward to seeing you all in person at the nearest opportunity. Sophia, back to you.
Conversation. I'd like to have a quick look at the finished discussion illustration. And if we can get that up on screen, please. And the session will now be available for on-demand viewing through Swapcard for 30 days post-event. And now I would like to just quickly mention that you can join us next at 1 p.m. EDT to explore the growing data center ecosystem in West Africa, sponsored by Main One. Wow, look at that. That's a great illustration. Thank you, Chris, for that. And we'll be sharing that on our social media later if you want to have a look at it in more detail. So thank you for joining us and see you in the next session.